I'm a bit, I'm a bit old-fashioned. Hang on. Not that one, not that one. Hang on a minute. I might just have to come out a minute and then just find it again. I knew this wouldn't work because I'm rubbish at things like this. Right, can everyone see that screen? Yeah, great. Okay, excellent. So, early years. So, let me just minimize that because I can't see anyone. Right, okay, so the early years, they're wonderful. They're wonder and the awe. They're amazing. All children 0 to 5. I'm really passionate about early years, and I've been working with under 5s for almost 25 years. I started working in nurseries and did all my qualifications and ended up running a nursery. And I worked with the Early Years Alliance for 10 years almost as well as an advisor. So I love working for the diocese as their advisor. And I'm also part of the Mustard Seed team, which I don't know if you've heard of, but we're a group of advisors that do everything to do with children, families and youth. So that's a little insight of what we do. So what are the early years? Okay, baby groups in churches and schools, churches and community halls, preschools and nurseries. Lots of nurseries are in schools now, so creches in churches, toddler groups, nursery schools. So a lot of my schools that I visit now are actually having nurseries in there, or even preschools. So they're looking at like a wraparound care, so that when you take your children to school, you drop your preschool off there and your reception there and your year 6 there. So it makes a lot of sense really to have that nursery in the actual school. Obviously early years goes right up into reception. Not a lot of people realise that the EYFS, which is the curriculum for the early years, goes right up into the reception year. So it covers literally 0 to 5 years. Also, we've got childminders. Childminders are our early years carers, that they have a couple of children, a group of children, and they're really important actually, part of our community, because they provide a really good service to working parents that can extend the hours, and they do come in possibly slightly cheaper than day nurseries as well. So I've got a lot of friends with childminders, and they do come to a lot of toddler groups, a lot of community events. And also you've got your nannies, so you've got your people that are qualified as nannies, and they will come into your home, or you will drop your child off at them. So there's quite a few of them there that we look at. Obviously, you've got early years in lots of different areas, in playgrounds and in play places, but these are the sort of the actual groups that we concentrate on when we talk about early years. And I will visit all of those. I will visit churches, I will help set up creches, I will help set up preschools, I will help with nurseries in schools, I will help with reception teachers, and I will help with all of them. The only ones I don't really go and visit or see our childminders. So anything that's church-based, I will go and see. So the next slide, funny enough, early years comes under the prenatal as well. So we're looking at supporting families even before the birth of a child, trying to engage with those parents, trying to see what support that they might need. Is it a single mum on her own? Is it a couple that are surrogates? It could be any sort of makeup of that family, and how we're engaging with those parents and giving that support. I was talking to a church a couple of years ago, and they actually do a pre-birth class, and they just have like a prayer. They just have a prayer sort of group where they pray with the parents, and the parents are from all faiths. It's in East London, so they're from all faiths, but they come to this one church and they engage with them. And from there, they can share their own stories and their knowledge, but they can also signpost outside agencies, which for churches that are in East London is hugely helpful, because a lot of these young families, these young parents, don't speak English, don't know the system in this country. So we could be the first place that they come and they don't know. They just don't know about preschool. They don't know about signing up to the health visitor or things like that. So we could be a really good support for helping those people that are just about to have a baby. So trusting and being safe. So the main thing that when I go into a preschool or a toddler group, I love going to preschools because I love it when the children come up and go, come and I'll show you what I've done. I've made this, I've made that. Come and see what we've done. I love it. And I always feel that I always say to the managers of a preschool or the leaders of a toddler group or anywhere that there's early years, if a child feels comfortable enough to come up to me and they don't know me, although of course we do have this safeguarding and safety without strangers and all that, but if they feel like they want to come and share what they're doing, they're happy, they're safe, and they're in an environment where they feel that they're safe and secure, and they have that trust in that place. And I think as a church, we're there to give support to our families that come to us and make a safe place, make a place where adults are trusted for the children and the parents, making it so that we're welcoming and we're friendly. We're not saying, oh, the children are making a noise again. We're very supportive. And just a little quick story about that. I went to a toddler group in Colchester, and they I'd not long been in this job. It's probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I went to go and visit them. And I walked in, and the first thing they said to me was, "Oh, we don't do God here." So I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'm not bringing my Bibles in. I'm not going to tell you you've got to do this, got to do that, because I don't do that. That's not what I do." I said, "I'm just coming to have a look and see and support you and see if there's anything you need from me." And so the leaders were, as a lot of toddler leaders are, people from the church, more elderly people, but they were doing an absolutely fantastic job. So as I was walking around the group, and I was looking and asking parents and some of the grandparents, because obviously a lot of grandparents look after their children, their grandchildren now. I was asking them, and I was saying to them, you know, how's this toddler group for you? What do you think? And every single mum, every single grandparent, every single dad, every person that was there said to me that this was such an important place for them, because if it hadn't been there, then they don't know what they would have done, because it was quite a deprived area, and they felt that this was a place they could go. They could get a snack. The children felt welcomed. They could talk to others. They could find things out, but they felt it was safe, and they felt it was a place that they could trust. So they don't do God. Well, actually, when I spoke to them afterwards, I said, "I think you are actually. I think God is here because what you're doing is you're providing this environment for these people to come, and this is amazing, you know." And they hadn't even thought of it like that. They just thought, "Oh, we set up in the morning, 9 o'clock, 9:30, we open our doors and 50 toddlers come in." But it's not about that. It's about making that environment right for those children and those adults. And it's about being welcome and friendly. You know, there's nothing worse than people turning around and going, "Oh, child, oh, they're so noisy. Don't they know they're in church and they have to be quiet?" I know there are times in church where there's a time in some services to be quiet or to be reflective, but there are times also when we do need to look at our young people and our young children and know that they are our future. These families are the people that are coming into our church. And if we tell them to be quiet, they're not going to come in for very long. When we got to our church, my husband's a priest, and we're up in Hertfordshire. We asked the creche people, there's a little creche in the service, and it was in the ladies' chapel. So we asked them to come over to the vicarage for a breakfast, and we said to them, "How do you feel about the creche?" They went, "What, you mean the naughty corner?" And we were like, "You call it the naughty corner?" And that's how they felt. They felt that they were in the naughty corner because they were too noisy in the service. So that completely got changed. So we now have a creche in the church, which I've helped set up, which is faith driven, so that adults are getting the faith as well as the children. And we do songs, prayers, we do the Lord's Prayer, and we sign everything, because obviously we have babies in there. But it's a totally different setup now. And they know that if they want to go out of the creche and go into the church, they can do that. It's not a problem. They can do whatever they want, whatever they feel comfortable doing. They're welcome to do whatever. So it is about that welcome, that inviting, and making them feel part of our congregation. So, top tips for toddlers. I always have these. Whenever I go out anywhere, I always say there's a top tip, because there always is. We know what a toddler's like. We know they stamp their feet. We know that. My grandson does. He's like this, like that sometimes. And I go, oh, Joshua. That is Joshua in the picture, actually. I just thought that, you know, I use my grandchildren because I don't have to have copyright then, only for their mum. But yeah, they have their tantrums. But, you know, it's all about listening to them and seeing what they want. The new curriculum, when you look at the curriculum of education for under fives, it is all about the child. It is literally all about what does the child want, what does the child need, and what does the child's interest, and where are their next level. And that is exactly what it should be. Obviously, you're going to have some sort of adult intervention with children, and there's going to be boundary issues, there's going to be sharing issues, but that's how they learn. It's all about independence. So my top tips for toddlers is that we smile. We have to smile. If we don't smile, there's no point doing it. We get to the child's level. There's no point standing over a child and saying, all right, down there, what are you playing with down there? Do you like it? What's that, Lego? What's that, Duplo? And the child's looking at you going, oh, what are they saying to me? So if it's appropriate, you can use the child's name. So if you know the child, you can say, oh, hi, Tommy. I wonder what you're playing with. Using those open questions, you know, I wonder if, what do you think? So that children don't clam up because you're asking them all these questions and they don't understand because they're all like. So it's about listening to them, listening to the child, give them time. I always say that if you're talking to a child of that age, talk to them, but listen, but give them time. We always used to say, when I was advising with the Early Years Alliance, it was a 10-second rule. Give them 10 seconds, because children of that age process very differently to us. So they need that time. And also be visual. So if you're doing anything with the child, make it visual, because they want to see what you're doing. What's that she's doing? And I used to, when I used to go work in preschools, we always had the children that wouldn't join in the book, wouldn't come into the books. You know, they sit, I'm not listening to a story, I want to play with this, I don't want to do it, which is fine. But of course, as soon as you get the book out and you've got props and you're looking, all of a sudden they start wiggling over, and eventually they're like wiggling, and eventually they're joining in because they want to join in, but they don't really, but because they're seeing something that they really like. But there's also involved in that is accepting boundaries and reinforcement. Very important now that there is a boundaries. Children like boundaries. They like being told that they shouldn't or they should do something. It is important that they know when they've done wrong, but we also have to match that up with reinforcement and positive reinforcement. Oh, you've done extremely well, well done. And if there has been an issue, then it's done in a positive way, and it's a consistent way. But the main thing is that to have fun. If you can't have fun with a child under 5, then don't do it, because it is all about fun. It's all about fun, and through that fun they learn. So perfect. Right, okay, next slide. So stories. So what stories do we have? So you can do parables. So if you're reading a story with a child, you've got your parables, which are great. They're perfect, absolutely, perfect to do anything like that. There's always, I always find that if you do a parable with a child, especially if you're doing one with sheep, it all seems to be the parable of the lost sheep when you're doing it with an under 5. There's always somebody that's made the sheep with cotton wool, and there's always a googly eye, and you're getting your sheep in. And I remember doing it on Zoom in lockdown. Somebody said, oh, Anne, can you make a sheep? And the sheep came in with the googly eyes. So again, it's all about having props and showing people that what you've got, and that gauges their attention if they can see it with their own eyes. And also you've got stories with actions. We're very fortunate at our church that somebody gave us loads of handmade story bags. So when we read Daniel the Lions, we've got a little Daniel and some lions, and they've been handmade, but you can buy them, you don't have to buy them, you can make them out of paper. But things like props are really good to help explain that story, because you're showing them exactly what you're doing. And I think the main thing is when you're talking about very, very small children, say 1 or 2, maybe 2 years, 3 years old, is to make everything short. There's no point reading a story which is 50 minutes long, because I can assure you they will not listen to that. Probably I wouldn't either. But yeah, so make a story short. And I think one of the best ways is, I remember going to a church fairly recently, and the incumbent goes in there. He doesn't actually have a book. He doesn't have anything. He just makes them up. He literally makes his stories up. And it could be about a mouse. It could be about this, it could be about that. But it's just a made up story. But sometimes that's better than actually having a book that you have to show. And then when we're talking about songs, of course, we're talking about action songs. So, you know, I'm Dingle Dangle Scarecrow, whatever, but there's lots of action songs. There's lots of religious action songs that are really good as well. So, you know, there's lots of things. One of my creches that I've set up, I helped set up in Brentwood, they have a song bag that we devised, and they just pick out the songs, and the picture of the song is on the front, because then the child knows that if it's a mouse and a clock, that it's hickory dickory dock. So you're actually teaching the language by actually a visual representation of what the song is. So it's all learning, but it's not learning for them. They don't know, it's fun. So yeah, anything to do with arms and legs and actions and laying on the floor and screaming and shouting and whatever. So that's really good. Looking at, hang on, let's go to this slide, because it's got out of sync somehow. So praying with under 5s, well, the answer to that is yes, just yes, yes, and yes. Young children respond really well to prayers. Young children tend to say thank you. Adults tend to ask for things, and children tend to say thank you. It just happens to be like that. They love to pray. I've just been into a school nursery, and I've been looking at their psalms. They have like it's a bit like the Ofsted, which is the religious side of their learning. So have their psalms, and they were a bit worried that they weren't sort of doing enough on RE and Christianity, so we did a bit of work. But actually, I said to them, one of the simplest things you can do is set up a prayer corner. It doesn't have to be a prayer corner. It can just be a reflective corner. And then I've got a prayer bag that I showed them. And again, it's like the song bag. The prayers are all pre-done with pictures, and on the back are prayers. So the children dip into the bag, pull out a picture, and it could be a picture of creation, or the moon, or the stars, or trees, or whatever, animals. And on the back will be a prayer written like, "Dear God, thank you so much for our animals." That's all you need. That is all you need for children of that age, something that simple. And then it goes on a board. And the school contacted me last week, and they just said the children absolutely love it. And then from there, they've extended their prayer by saying to the children, "Is there something you would like to pray for today?" So then the children are coming up with all their own ideas. Some of the older children, up to 4-year-olds. So yeah, perfect. You know, why not? Why not do that? Why not do that? And I've got a little bag that I've got toys. So the toys all come out, and they all sit in a circle, and they all pray. So I've got a couple of praying bears, which are lovely, but they all sit together, and it makes it more of their age. You know, they're sitting together in their age and having that sort of time of just calm and thinking and praying. And I say I'm a great advocate for doing the Lord's Prayer, and we do it signing with sign language. So again, children get to learn. Children, they do a lot of sign language in nurseries now. You'll find a lot of Makaton is used, so they're used to doing signing anyway. So there's no reason why you can't sign the Lord's Prayer. So yeah, pray under 5s, absolutely, definitely. They're far better at praying than we are. So looking ahead. So I put in here, make a list of things you would do in under 5s and families. This was when we were not remote, we were actually in the room, and we could have a little bit more of a discussion time. But making sure that what you do for your families under 5s in your church, is it accessible for everybody? Is it a well, you know, we might have a couple of toys in the corner somewhere, or how can we encourage more under 5s to come in? Do we have a toddler group in the church? If we don't, could we start one? Do we have a creche in the church service? Would that encourage more families to come, because they know that they've got a little place where they can just go and be with their children, have a little bit of faith, or just have a little bit of, no, not, I don't call it time out, but they don't feel under pressure. There's nothing worse than a mother in church going shh, making more noise than the actual child, and then everyone gets stressed. So, is there a little corner or something they can go and have a little play or something like that? So it's just about thinking about your area that you're working in, and seeing whether you are actually accessible and good for families in your church. Because at the end of the day, if you're not engaging with those families, you're unlikely then to get older children coming into the church, because those children are not going to continue to grow up and become part of your new congregation. So that is just so important. So as I'm nearly out of time, the last slide is help is here. So I'm part of the education team in the diocese, and that's my details there. And I'm also part of the mustard seed team, as I said before, and we help with anything to do with 0 to 18. There's 4 of us, and we go out across the diocese, and we would do any work with any church to do with early years, primary school and senior school, and up to the age of 18 and sometimes above. So we are quite able to come out and visit anybody who would like some help. And the last thing.
Thank you very much, Andy. It really is good to spend this half an hour with you. I'm going to share my screen as well. Hopefully that's all going to happen, and you can see now my presentation. Let me say by way of introduction that this is an abbreviated version of one that I deliver to curates in their first year, and I felt like that some of the slides are appropriate for this evening, and in fact have made available all of the slides that I would use and some additional material if you want to take it further on a web page. There is a feedback form.
So sorry to interrupt. You might, because I hate to, but just to clarify, so you deliver this to those curates who are available daytime, and yes, some LLMs that come daytime as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's great.
So there is a feedback form which gives you an opportunity to reflect on the role of governors and governance from the material that's in the presentation. So I'm wondering, is anyone on screen a school governor? Can you raise a hand if you are, or use the reactions thumbs up? No, I'm speaking to a group. Mojola? Yes, you are. Great. Well, I may call on you later to tell this group of people how fantastic it is to be a governor in a school. Most of what I'm going to say applies specifically within a Church of England school, and obviously within the Diocese of Chelmsford. However, it's transferable if you take up a role as a governor within a maintained school, other schools or academies. And I believe that it's really important that the Church of England recognises the significance of the schools in the parishes around the diocese. This is a huge opportunity. It was about 20 years ago when the phrase "the Church's mission to the nation" was first reinforced, if you like, as an opportunity to enable us as a church to impact the lives of children and families. And I would go as far as to say that there is probably little more significant that you can do by being part of a school governance board. And one of the reasons for that is, from time to time, it is necessary to appoint a head teacher. And the more clergy and trained people within the church that are engaged in the work of a governance board and therefore impact the final decision, frankly I have to say, is the better. When we come to the period for questions, please feel free to come back to me on any of this. The former Bishop John Cox wrote a book called More Than Caring and Sharing, and he talked about our advantage as church schools, because we not only have had schools for over 200 years, but we now can draw obviously on our 2000 plus years of story, reflection, wisdom and experience. Quite a lot of that is summed up in the Church of England vision for education, which is for all of our schools and those that we can influence outside of the Church of England context to be more deeply Christian, whilst at the same time serving the common good. And it's true that we are different from the Catholic provision, which is primarily for people of Catholic faith, whereas Church of England schools are primarily, whilst there may be numbers of children that are taken in from church attendance, the primary purpose is missional. We're about reaching our communities and meeting the needs of the common good in our communities. Such an opportunity. I mean, if you stop to think of how many children are in the church that you serve in on a Sunday or in midweek groups, and then calculate the against the number of children in the local parish school or a community-based school, you've got a massive opportunity for influence at all levels. And in fact, as this slide suggests, the story that we build on, the story of Jesus, the story contained in both testaments, is our opportunity in schools is to build on that story, to take that story to our schools and in fact make a huge difference. Last year, one of the curates, I think it was, came up with the opportunity of governance with the expression to serve with priestly humanity. And that's one of the things that I want to really encourage you to consider now or in the future, as to how you can take your priestly ministry at whichever level you're at, and put human flesh on that in the context of a school. Or as Maurice Wolf puts it, practices are such that a Christian normative vision is part and parcel of what these practices are. Practices are essentially belief shaped, and beliefs are essentially practice shaping. And I've been on governing boards where there's been no other Christians, and it's really tough. But where there are a number of Christians, and particularly where there are trained clergy or LLMs, because you've been through some theological training, you have the opportunity to reflect on how that can impact within the church school context, or any context for that matter. So I came across a quote from or tweet from someone called Dean, trainee vicar man. I'm probably going to be using this for years, because he tweeted, "Governance locally is important. I will try to pay attention to cultures, strategies and finances, and the relational power dynamics that are also part of it." And then he asks this key question: where might Christ be positioned? I've put it in a different ways over the years, but I think as I go to a governance meeting, as I've prayed about that meeting, asking myself, where might Christ be positioned as I look at this or that or other issues or planning or outcomes? How can I bring Christ into that context and his purposes into the discussion? Whether that's overtly or not, that is always possible. So I look on the role of curates, incumbents, whether a non-stipendiary or stipendiary. I look on LMs who have the opportunity to be part of a school community, whether that's during the day or during the evenings. There are four basic things I would say you can achieve as you minister into that situation. So see it really as part and parcel of your ministry that actually is built into the nature of the ex officio governor, who will be the incumbent in the local area or local parish church. It's an opportunity to learn for yourself. It develops skills that are so transferable. I probably will say this again, but transferring what you learn in school governance to the work of your PCC or ministry team, whatever your structures are within your particular parish, this is second to none. These things that you will and can learn. So here they are. Here are the 4 things as you work and influence. The first is pastoral. Here is an opportunity to develop the pastoral ministry within the school for the staff, on occasions for pupils, but also that 12, 15 people around the governance table, some of whom will never set foot in your church, but you have the opportunity to be a pastor towards the needs of those people. And when there's a crisis, sadly, occasionally someone dies in service, or there's a suicide amongst the families, or somebody is, in a really big medical crisis, maybe a father or grandfather or grandmother, you have an open door that you might not necessarily be able to find in relation to the church community itself. Secondly, it's a practical way of influencing all of the decisions that are being made in that school. Thirdly, it's one of the ways in which you can get a little bit more engaged at a strategic level, and sometimes at a practical on a day-to-day basis of contributing to religious education and collective worship. And you're going to hear about both of those in the second part of this evening. And finally, depending on how you interpret the word prophetic, I want to suggest tonight that it's a way of bringing Christian thinking, theological understanding into all aspects of governance that you will come across during the course of your service as a school governor. Now, there are 3 plus 1 very specific areas, so there are many details to these, but governance boils down to the vision and ethos and strategic direction of the school. And it's really important now that is part of and drawn out of both Scripture and the Church of England vision, because when they have those SIAMs, church school inspections, that's what you're being inspected against. Secondly, and bear in mind that the average governor does not always understand the vision or the biblical rationale for that vision or the definition of those values, but you may well, as you come into the governing board and have the opportunity to talk some of those through. And in a situation where there is a development of, a whole school look at, is our vision fit for purpose and all of that, what a tremendous opportunity that is to influence from Scripture. Secondly, there's holding executive leaders, that's head teachers, for the educational performance of the organisation. Thirdly, to oversee the financial performance. And don't worry if that's not your thing. What governing boards do now is they recruit from time to time when there's vacancies, people against different skills. So there's almost certainly going to be someone on the governing board who has some skill around financial performance. And although it's a corporate responsibility, you have the opportunity to sort of not quite take the back seat, but you don't have to roll your sleeves up on that one. And fourthly, this is not in the governance handbook that the government provide, but fourthly, it is about securing, that is upholding and developing the Christian character of this school. If it's a Church of England school, if it says it over the top of the notice board or school gate, it has every reason to be a school that develops its Christian character. And we're seeing these days how significant that is in the life of all of our schools. So I want to just give you one or two examples of how this might work out in practice, and you'll see, I hope, a little bit more about what I mean in terms of influence. So if we take this one, first of all, every school has to have a behaviour policy. And that behaviour policy can be based upon a Christian understanding of justice. So restorative justice can be a really important contribution to the actual policy that is set by the governing board. So take the example of that policy coming to a governing board meeting, and when you've read it through before, you think, well, there's not much Christian in this behaviour policy. So you have the opportunity to think that through, to take some advice and support on thinking, well, how can that be developed? This one, schools should be outstanding places of hope. It's a very real part of the Church of England vision for education. So how can we enable that sense of hope in all its different iterations within the school community? Well, it starts at the governing board, or certainly with the head teacher. And your conversations, strategic conversations on that, can make a world of difference. So what about church schools being a community of forgiveness? I'm governor of a school at the moment, helping them out really, where I was taken around by the head teacher, and on the wall on one of the walls there was this list of the key values, the core values of this school. All of those values could be defined Christianly, theologically. One of them was forgiveness. So I asked him, I think probably a difficult question. I said, so how does forgiveness work out in terms of the behaviour policy, or the way in which children are treated in the classroom, and things like that? He looked at me, he's a strong, committed Christian, but he looked at me and said, I'll have to think about that. Because it hadn't been on his agenda. But it is a Church of England school. One of its key values that they get the children to think about and apply is forgiveness. So that has to apply as well to the adults, and how the adults treat each other and the children. That's the prophetic voice that you can have. That's the way in which you can begin to shape policy and practice. And as I come into land, in order that you have chance to ask any questions you might have, I am constantly I'm challenged by these words of Jesus that you'll be very familiar with. He came to serve, not to be served. And I think if you find the opportunity to be part of a school governing board, and therefore part of the school community, which you may not otherwise have chosen to do, but because you've been to this half an hour, you're definitely going to go away and try and find a position. No? This is an opportunity to serve God and to serve a community, to go beyond the church doors where most people will not come, apart from maybe a wedding or a funeral, and get behind the scenes, as it were, feet under the table, to develop a much more Christian influenced context and to serve the children. And I think of that as building God's kingdom. This may be my theology and not yours, but have a think about this. Tom Wright puts in one of his books, what you do with your body in the present matters, because God has a great future in store for it. And then he goes on, what you do in the present by writing, preaching, singing, etc., down to the yellow words that I've added into the sentence, governing and educating, all these things will last into God's future. They are part of what we may call building for God's kingdom. Other people talk about the engagement within the school as being an opportunity to bring signs of God's kingdom. I would say as well, it's an opportunity to build relationships that will bring people potentially long term into God's kingdom. And this is one of the starting places for all of this. And in just a second, I'm going to give you, some 10 minutes for questions. I hope there's going to be some, otherwise I'm going to look as I was too short. But here's some of the practical things that you may do if you become a governor. First of all, foster a relationship with the head teacher. The head teacher is often seen to be the spiritual leader of the school. And they may not be fully equipped in all sorts of ways for that role, on a scale from those who are actually not Christians to those who have not had much training in that whole area. So being able to lean on you and learn from you through fostering that relationship. Secondly, well-being is on the agenda for everybody at the moment, and so it should be for us, shouldn't it? We're pastorally minded, and therefore insisting on the well-being of needs of schools is important. Thirdly, you don't need to get bogged down in lots of detail. We call that operational, and it's part of the work of a head teacher. You focus on the strategic in those governance boards meetings. Fourthly, I really do recommend thinking about how you ask questions in a coaching context as a way of answering coaching for the work of the governing board. So using open questions when having that discussion around the table. You're probably familiar with some of that. There will be a need to attend some training, and the diocese through me puts on quite a bit of training for school governors, and other courses are relevant that are run for staff. And so it's good if you can to make the time to attend that training, to be part of the group of governors that are learning. And here, well, what more can I say to you than model what you expect of other people? You've got this opportunity through influence to model what you're doing. And finally, and then some questions. At the top here, you have the web address to download the full set of slides, along with some supporting papers and that feedback form that's designed to help people like yourselves to reflect on the opportunity of school governance, particularly in our church schools. Do copy it down accurately, because if you put the wrong capital in the wrong place, you won't get in. So do take that. And on the left hand side, details are on the Chelmsford Diocesan website, which is a different website, cdbe.org.uk. You can find links to my Grove booklet. I imagine you're familiar with Grove books. I hope so, because I am becoming the chair of the editorial board for Grove Book later in September. But that's one of those books which I have written. If you want to delve a little bit more into governance, that is probably one of the places to start. Up the top is the details of a more in-depth course that's probably not something you'll be able to engage with, but that's run by Liverpool Hope University. So thank you so much for your patience and for listening. I think there is a few minutes, isn't there, Andy, for any key questions. There is one hand raised, but I think it was possibly from before, from Mojola. I don't know if I'll pronounce your name right. Do not be offended, please, if I haven't.
Moji, was that a question?
Seems not.
No, it wasn't a question.
That's okay. It's a hand, and that's all good.
Yeah, just to indicate that I'm a school governor.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the one person in the room, which is brilliant. Although Helen's joined us, I think. Are you a governor, Helen? Yep.
I am. Yes, I am a governor.
No, there's two.
So
by the end of this next 5 minutes, will everybody be a governor? Raise your hand. No. Jonathan, do you want to come in with a question?
Yeah, sure. I've just been thinking about this since we did the sort of online training part of this. One of the primary calls of a deacon, and obviously that goes on, is to proclaim the gospel.
Yep.
And actually, it was interesting reading through some of the policy stuff that actually there is quite a clear point that that there's a sort of a need to kind of hold back a little bit, because I think the word that's used in the official wording is proselytizing. It's not about proselytizing. So the question that I have, and I can't quite reconcile, is how do those things come into play? Because on one hand, we're called to proclaim the gospel, but on the other hand, we're called not to, in a way. And I couldn't quite reconcile that. I wonder if you could shed some light for me.
Well, I think Helen may address that to some extent in thinking about collective worship. There possibly is a tension, but I don't think it needs to be, certainly at a governance level. We are also called to be salt and light, and nobody tells us we can't be, or nobody can tell us we can't be. And there's huge opportunity within governance, I think actually on the ground as well, to work as salt and light, to be prophetic, or to bring Christian thinking, particularly in our church schools. I think you have a slightly more challenging context if you're in a maintained school. But I mean, I was a governor, I was chair of trustees of a 5-school multi-academy trust, and frequently, though they may not have always realised it, my Christian thinking was impacting a range of things over time. So it's about having that influence impact. And the Church of England vision and the inspection process that goes alongside that, if you delve into it, will give you masses of scope to not proselytize. We're not about making Christians, but we are about enabling people to have, well, I will steal Helen's thunder, for children to have an encounter with the living Christ. I mean, it's as clear as that. How you interpret that, of course, will be different from group school to school, but there's plenty of opportunity. But you're not going to go in there and call people to come to faith. It's a bit more nuanced. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Okay.
And I think, as Mike says, we'll hear more from Helen on that. I think that there was a time when there was a sort of assumption of Christendom. We assumed everyone was basically a Christian unless they were wearing a turban. And now we're in an age where we don't make that assumption any longer. But we have the stance of winsomely and without coercion inviting. And everything is invitational, but nothing is pushing and pressuring and doing any of those things. But Helen will talk more about that. Is there anyone else with a question for Mike before we thank him and let him go?
Silence, Andy. Silence.
There is silence, unless I'm not seeing somebody's hand.
No,
Well, let's take a quick break now then. Time to stretch and get yourself a cup of tea or whatever it is that you need to do. And we will be back with Helen at exactly 8:05. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. That's fantastic. As Andy said, my name's Helen Craig. I have the complete pleasure of being one of the church school advisors that look after about all of the church schools in our diocese. It's about 130 schools that include primary and secondary schools. So I get to look after about 25 of them. But also in my role, I also have responsibility for collective worship across the diocese. So with that role, I support and guide and work with schools and offer training to head teachers and to staff in line with that, alongside the advisors. There will be, and because of the way that we're presenting, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. So please do sort of like save them for the end, or shout out during if you like. I don't mind, but I won't be able to see if you've got your hand up unless somebody just calls out during it. There's a hand up, Andy. I don't know if you want to do that, if somebody really wants to come in beforehand. But do feel free if you want to ask something on one of the slides, don't hesitate to do so, or we can ask questions at the end. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just go over some of the key documents that really drive the way that our church schools work. So the first document that I want to bring your attention to is the Church of England's Vision for Education. This came out in 2016, but it is a really crucial document that schools use. And I'd really encourage you to consider reading this document. The Church of England's Vision for Education is also a vision for all schools. But the way that it's slightly different is it underpins the school vision in biblical theology. And that's, as advisors, what we encourage our schools to do. So here it underpins it with the verse from John 10:10, life in all its fullness. And it says that we should offer our children experiences of education, of life in all its fullness. And within that, there are 4 elements. That we should be educating our children for wisdom, knowledge and skills. We should be educating for hope and aspiration. We should be educating for the sense of community and living well, and educating to give them dignity, everybody dignity and respect. And those 4 elements run through the whole of this document. And also they are, we encourage our schools to really embrace all of those elements in their school vision. The other key document that I'd like to bring your attention to from the Church of England is Valuing All God's Children. And this is guidance that schools will use and governing bodies will use with regards to challenging homophobic, biphobic or transphobic bullying. Justin Welby mentions that every one of us is loved by God, and we must avoid at all costs diminishing the dignity of any individual to a stereotype or a problem. Our schools offer a community where everyone is a person known and loved by God, supported to know their intrinsic worth. So this is a very key document for schools as they deal with the very challenging issues that they face on a regular basis. Now, church schools, as well as having an Ofsted, as all local authority schools have, they also have a church school inspection. And a church school inspection focuses on the church school's education through a centrality of the Christian vision. And it really puts a spotlight on the right of all pupils and adults to flourish. And that language of flourish really comes out in that document from the Church of England. And the inspectors, the SIAMS inspectors, will ask questions and seek evidence that demonstrates the impact that their school's vision has directly on the lives of learning and development of all within school. If you are a governor within the schools that you serve, you will be very much involved in this process. You'll be involved in the preparation of the documentation and on the actual inspection day. And within that, they very much look at the school's vision. They ask that you take account of the Church of England vision for education as well as the Dyson vision, but also that the school vision reflects its community and context. Every school, we are a very, very diverse diocese, as I'm sure you're very aware. We go from tiny little rural schools to 3 elementary primary schools. We go from inner city schools to rural and seaside schools. So that's what we try to encourage all schools to really think about their local context and the children that they serve and the communities that they serve in creating their school vision. SIAM's inspection schedule has the one core question, which is, as you can see here, about how the school's distinctive Christian vision and how is it promoted and established by all. And then it also feeds into some 7 strands. And the 7 strands, you can see here some similarity from the Church of England's Vision for Education here. The 7 strands are related to vision and leadership, and that's leadership of the head teacher and the senior leadership team of the school, but also the governors. And the involvement of the church in there as well. Again, talks about wisdom, knowledge and skills. That's the attainment that children, the knowledge that children get, as well as spiritual knowledge. Then we assess against character development, how the children are called to social action. That's the courageous advocacy, how they're involved in causes and have a chance for hope. Community and living well together. That's looking at schools' behaviour policy and how whether they have a system of looking at forgiveness, how they treat children in that way. Then we have collective worship, having its own strand, as does RE. Both very important. I can say that because Ruth and I are here, so that's why we think that collective worship and RE should definitely have their own strands. The SIAM's outcomes are made on a best fit judgment. Collective worship and RE are also given a standalone judgment. RE is inspected more rigorously in a voluntary aided school than it is in a voluntary controlled school. They may look at it in a voluntary controlled school, but they really drill down in it in a VA school. I'm sure Ruth will talk lots more about RE in schools. So that's so as you can see then, schools are driven by some documentation from the Church of England. They are also very aware of their inspection schedule and what they need to be providing for their children within that in order to reach a good judgment. Okay. Has anybody got any questions about those documents before I move on to collective worship? Anybody got any questions about those at all? Before I move on to collective worship? No? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask, give you a little moment to think now. I would like you to think about what your memories are of collective worship. Perhaps we could share this, perhaps you could shout them out and give yourself, what are your memories of? What did it mean to you? And why do you think it might be described as the beating heart of a school life? I'll give you a chance to think about those questions. And then perhaps if anybody would like to share what their memories are of collective worship in schools or assemblies. Anybody feel like sharing? I'm very quiet on me.
Hi, it's Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
So I didn't grow up as a Christian in a Christian family, particularly. We never went to church. But I do remember vividly enjoying collective worship and assemblies in school time when we had it. And I always thought, well, looking back at it, because I probably didn't necessarily think at the time, it was something that was good that the whole school did together.
Lovely. Lovely. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that real coming together of, a group. Thank you. That's fantastic. Anybody else like to share their memory of collective worship?
When we met with the group, other curates recently, we had this conversation, and I shared with others how the different experience between primary and secondary. Primary, I remember that very much sense of community. I went to the Methodist primary school. We went to the church. The church was through the end of the building, and it was a memory of good times together. When I think of secondary collective worship, I'm afraid my visions are of a dirty school hall, standing in lines, and my only main memory probably was the day the Gideons came in to hand out the Bible. So just to share those two thoughts with you.
Thank you, Ruth.
I think
Can
I would echo that difference between primary and secondary, but I'm reminded of the fact that there were two different local vicars that used to come into my secondary school, one of whom was known as Pray Along With. He was quite a serious person, and the other one was known as Sing Along With, because he used to bring his guitar and his cowboy hat, and I think was probably the most popular of the two.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Jo. Thank you. Thank you. That's really lovely. Thank you very much for sharing. I think most of us can perhaps remember something of our collective worship experience in school. Sometimes it is just like you say, people or the coming together, but it's the people that really make a difference, I think, to that. And I'd like you to hold on to that, because it is the people that lead it that will make a difference to the children that we serve in our communities. Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, so this is what the Church of England say the purpose of education is. And Jeff, I think they must have been pleased if you could have been with them, because they say it's about a sense of community as well, as you can see here. So you were spot on, because the Church of England agree with you. So that's great. So this is what they say the purpose of collective worship is. It's a chance to step away from the target-driven culture that much of education is. It's a space for an encounter with faith in God, providing opportunity for larger questions of meaning and purpose. There's shared sets of symbols and actions, so we have like singing or times of reflection, and it's very much so that schools can draw on it in times of joy and grief. The sense of fellowship, as Jeff pointed out, and in times of crisis and celebration, it's set aside so that they can gather and support each other as a community. And I know very much that from working with schools that have come back from being with COVID and have been very distant from one another and been stuck on sort of virtual collective worships, the children tell me that they've really missed that gathering together and that feeling that they are all one family. Now, again, there are a number of documents that guide collective worship in our schools. The most recent, there's the inspection schedule that I've spoken about, which has a whole strand for collective worship that guides it for schools. And there is a new, sorry, it seems to have moved forward. I haven't even touched it and it seems to be doing its own thing. Sorry about that. And a guidance document, which is the statement for entitlement, which is what I'm going to be sharing with you today as well. So firstly, it's important to really make sure that we are clear that a school has collective worship, whereas in a church, it's corporate worship. Because and that makes a very difference as to how we lead collective worship. We have to ensure that there is no assumption that we all come with the same beliefs and values and that it's non-confessional. Children come to our school from a range of family backgrounds, ages and aptitudes, and that's important to remember in our schools. It's very much, that's why we call it collective worship and not corporate worship. We are not faith schools, we are church schools. And within this document, the Statement for Entitlement, it talks about the 3 I's. And these are what I'm going to spend some time looking at today. The inclusive, invitational and inspiring nature that collective worship in schools needs to be. So with invitational, parents, adults and children can expect to encounter worship that is consistently, there's invitational, no compulsion to do anything. Rather, it's the freedom, the opportunity to engage for the freedom of those with different faiths and who profess no faith. Now, quite a lot of there's lots of analogies and metaphors that are used, but the one that they use here is the idea of warm fires and open doors. The fact that the warmth of the fire is the clarity of the message, and there is no value to an encounter that's watered down, but more importantly, the door is left open. And so it's almost as that you can sit as near or as far away from the fire as you'd like to. By being invitational, the important thing is that people are invited to pray in their own way, and it should be always accompanied by the option to reflect. And that is quite a change for some schools, because they would say, well, let's pray. And now this is very much an offering to children. You may like to join with us if you'd like to. If not, there's an opportunity to reflect. The inclusive nature, we've got to think that people are on different stages of their spiritual journey. And here it's time for children to think and ask questions. Good collective worship will not be done to children, but it will be giving them a chance to sort of consider and actually say that they might not agree with it. I love the idea that it's not done to, but children's contributions are really valued. We have very much now seen a real drive in encouraging children to be leaders and evaluators of collective worship. And a good school, a good church school with good collective worship will have lots of children being involved, involved in the choosing of the songs, involved in the leading of it, involved in the liturgy, the prayers and reflections, and sometimes even taking the contents. Many of our schools will have worship councils or worship warriors who will take the lead on that, just in the same way that school councils have the lead for other aspects of school life. We are called to ensure that our collective worship is inspiring, and I think that's a challenge. Sometimes we see this word and we think we need to be sort of all singing and dancing. I don't think it's asking for that at all. I think it's asking that we really take a time to sort of spend on being courageous advocates of good causes. It's about encouraging the children to think, and it's about looking at the big questions, encouraging social action. If children can go out and do things, that's a fantastic way. So invitational language, it's totally fine for you to say, I believe, but it's not okay to say we believe. Or to say Christians believe, but it's not the we, because that's assuming children have faith. And prayer, again, as I've mentioned, is a natural and valued part in the culture of the school. Most of the schools that Bruce and I will visit use prayer throughout the school day, at lunchtimes, at the end of school days, during collective worship, but it's not compulsory or forced, and children may join in or may take a moment of silence. And worship has a variety of with different music. Joe talked about the vicar that came in with his guitar, and that's a valued part of collective worship. But so is liturgy, so is silence, story, and where appropriate, the Eucharist. Some of our schools do offer the Eucharist to their children. or their alongside their churches and their clergy, obviously, because their teachers were not. So good worship is creative and it inspires, and that's what we talked about, the inspiring them into action. And they talk about worship and it causes them to reflect on their behaviour and attitudes. You see, it causes them to think, perhaps even, and also to perhaps share it at home and with others. That's what inspirational worship is. Schools generally would have this as a format for their collective worship. So there would be a gathering, perhaps with some liturgy, some Anglican liturgy. There'd be a welcome. There'd be something to engage the children with. This might be a Bible. This might be a Bible story. This might be. It might be a thought. It might be some pictures. Then there's an opportunity for the children to respond. That might be through talk partners. It might be through thinking. It might be through questions from the leaders, and then the sending out. Again, often that's sent with Anglican liturgy and with a song, with songs and singing as well. A very valued part of collective worship. Okay, before I move on to the chance for questions, I would encourage you to look at your local church school's website and have a look at their vision. Can you see it underpinned in biblical theology? Are they on that journey yet, or do they need to do some more work with their advisors? Perhaps read the latest SIAMS inspection report. But please be aware of the date on the inspection report for your local school, because we have recently moved to a new inspection framework. So if it's more than, say, 2-3 years, it will be done under the old framework. So you might see it might be a little bit more, I'm afraid the grade descriptors have become harder to meet now, so which is a little bit sad. Perhaps I appreciate you're very busy people, but if you do have an opportunity to read the Church of England's Vision for Education, not a very long document, and even if you read the first 2 pages, that would be great. So it gives you an idea of what the Church of England is saying about their vision for education. And I'd really encourage you to get in touch with your school. They would really love to hear from you. I was given the idea, the image a little while ago about a school is like a sweetie shop. And I think you have the chance to visit the sweetie shop. There's lots there that you can do and lots of joy that you can find in a school. So if you are able to support your local schools in any way, I think you will be richly rewarded from what you can get from it yourself, as well as the schools will be very blessed to have you working with them. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that. And just take any questions if anybody has any questions for me before I hand over to Ruth. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen, at all? Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Helen. That was really helpful. Yeah, really put it in a good context for me. Probably a question out of ignorance more than anything else, but I was just really thinking about the inclusiveness of the worship, so that collective rather than corporate worship, and the really important distinction between the two. But just thinking then in terms of from how we see it as worship, is it a sense that so are we explicitly worshipping the Trinity, God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, to which other people are invited to do or not as they wish, or is it kind of more of a generic invitation to worship in some kind of more nebulous form?
No, I think it is very much. If it is you can present that as Christians we believe in God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and this is what we offer. It's not about and Hindus believe that we are a church school, so it has to be wholly Christian acts of collective worship. But it's about it's an offering. So you would offer Christian stories and the Trinity.
So, and then within that, and just a practical question is, but because it can't be confessional, does that rule out things like the creed?
Yes. Well, you could say, I'm saying this prayer, and this is a, you could, I said yes very quickly. I would think that is not appropriate for all children to be saying. They do say the Lord's Prayer, but children are invited to say or to join with it. Most children do and have a strong understanding, but I think the creed is asking them to be confessional. I believe in, I think that's probably not appropriate for a collective worship in schools. But it is appropriate if you were talking about it in an RE lesson about what Christians believe and what Christians do. So there is a place for it, but that's in the RE lesson when you're talking about Christianity.
Yeah, because I suppose you're starting with it, but we believe in God the Father. Like already you've said we believe, and perhaps that's not what you're allowed to. Okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
Right, Johnson. Yeah, exactly right. That's great.
And I think I'd probably want to say, actually, even in a community school, there's absolutely no reason to soft pedal on saying exactly what we as Christians believe, as long as you don't exactly in the same as in a church school, as long as you don't make the assumption that other people, that your audience also believes it, whether they're in a church school or a non-church school. Assume that the great majority do not believe the things that you're saying, but don't hold back from saying that you believe in God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
And I think it also goes back to that the document clearly says it's not a watered down version. You don't have to water it down, so that's not a reason to not water it down. But if you do have the opportunity to go into schools and to lead collective worship and even to spend time in the schools, you are going to be one of the few Christians that some people will meet. You have such an impact on the lives of the children that I cannot tell you, that they will remember the difference you make to them. So you are in a very privileged position, because what you say to the children will impact their understanding of Christianity, because they'll say that's what a Christian's like. So it's a really lovely, a real privilege you have, and you can make some amazing changes to those children's lives. Any other questions?
Helen, thank you so much. You're so welcome to stick around, but equally we do understand if you need to go. We're very grateful to you. We're on the final leg.
I'm just impressed that my internet managed to stay up for this session. So I think it's a win before I'm going to run away before it crashes and burns.
Excellent. And our final leg is with Ruth, who is also a member of the schools team and leads on RE. So Ruth, over to you.
Hey, thank you. I'm very conscious you've had a couple of hours before you reach to religious education, something I'm really passionate about, and I have the privilege of leading religious education across the diocese. And there's plenty to talk about. I've been in role as a school diocesan advisor since 2016. It's the best job in the world, but the world of religious education is changing, and I'm going to give you a real whistle-stop tour of some things, and I'm sure there'll be things I say that you may want to come back and ask later. Apologies to those of you who may know some of what I say already from lived experience, and welcome to others who this may be new territory. And apologise for my lighting. I've got terrible problems with my camera tonight, but I will plough on. Hopefully, I can move the screen. Well, that's good stuff. All right. Okay, so first of all, I've jumped a slide. Hold on. No, I haven't. First, I want to I've introduced myself, and I also wanted to state again about the changing landscape of religious education. I think it's really important for us to hold on to the fact that religion and belief does not stand still. And you will be people that know that more so than perhaps I do. But taking you back to your experience of religious education, again, primary and secondary, it will be very different from the religious education that pupils entering school now at the age of 5, or those who are mid-years, 11 and 12, or those that are 18 are experiencing. And we need to be aware of that. So be aware of that changing world of religion and belief as you engage with religious education. Just put some points here around the legal framework. It is something that all schools should teach. It's not within the national curriculum, but it is there, and it's enshrined in law that it should be accessed. Well, you talk about local agreed syllabuses for many of the schools that you might support. And I'll come to those because, as Helen said, we're a wide diocese and we have the joy of working with very different local agreed syllabuses. And if your schools you serve are voluntary controlled, they will follow their local agreed syllabus. Voluntary aided schools in some dioceses will have a Diocese scheme of work or a Diocese syllabus. Currently in Chelmsford, we don't have a Diocese syllabus. We encourage our church schools to follow their locally agreed syllabus. And that's partly because of the diversity that we've got across the diocese. Also, you will find some voluntary aided schools may choose a different syllabus, but as long as it meets their trust deed and their religious designation, they are allowed to do that. If you work with a voluntary aided school and you need to find out more, please do approach. And academies as well should provide RE, and a number of academies will follow their locally agreed syllabus. Other academies may adopt a syllabus right across. It's a really varied picture of what a syllabus is going to look like. But the profile of religious education comes under that legal framework. So as I've just said, Diocese of Chelmsford, we cover 8 local agreed syllabuses. And some of these are published syllabuses. Some of them are syllabuses that have been long-standing and have had recent tweaks. Others are syllabuses that are in a new, exciting, challenging, and perhaps risky place. So I'll run through them very, very quickly. Barking and Dagenham follow an agreed syllabus that is very comprehensive, is well supported with units of work, and has a very dedicated group, RE group that supports as well. Essex, probably the largest part, and the syllabus that at the moment is being implemented. So Essex, a locally agreed syllabus, is about to embark on a new syllabus that becomes statutory in autumn 23. So schools are engaging with some quite challenging questions at the moment. So if you work with schools in Essex, be prepared for some conversations about religious education. Havering have a published syllabus, which again is well supported, as does Redbridge and Southend and Thurrock. Waltham Forest also have a similar syllabus. And I can imagine you're sitting there saying, well, if they've got ones that are well supported with units of work and things behind, why not Essex? Well, just as Helen says, if you think about Essex, from the small rural school to the large school and the diversity of communities we've got, one way doesn't necessarily approach. And RE needs to reflect locality as well and local communities. So the first step, if you're supporting schools in your area, is to know which local agreed syllabus they follow. But across all of that, the most important aspect of religious education at the moment is that term religious literacy. And for that, we're talking about pupils having the ability to hold a balanced and well-informed conversation about religion and worldviews. We could spend the next couple of hours having a conversation about what we think is balanced and what we think is well-informed. And there is guidance for what that means, but that will mean different things for different schools in different contexts. What do they need to be able to talk confidently about Christianity? What do they need to know to talk confidently about the range of non-religious worldviews? So schools are beginning to ask themselves, what does that journey to having that well-informed conversation about religion and worldviews look like? I am going to be whizzing this, I'm very conscious of time. Church schools, as Helen's already said, sit under a statement of entitlement. And this is a key document that if you're supporting church schools is well worth having a read. Again, making sure you have the February 2019 one. And you can see there that reference to John 10 again, life in all its fullness. And you can see also that it places real purpose on understanding of Christianity. Schools are beginning to grapple much more with what it means as a diverse global living faith. Schools may be identifying those core beliefs and have improved their ability to engage with biblical text. That knowledge of religions and worldviews, which ones? But again, I point out to you that diversity and the change. If we're looking at the way a religion is practiced in the West, it may be very different from the way it's practiced in the East. And actually, we need to ensure, as our pupils are going to be global citizens, they are aware. There's also those challenging and really grappling big questions, perhaps the philosophical side of religion to explore. So I'm sure, like you, it's the end of a long day. And actually, what does that concept of religion and the influence, how has religion influenced our cultural heritage, the lives and the way that our society works? And what does it mean to have their own religious, spiritual and philosophical ways? That living, believing and thinking. And again, they are three words that schools are beginning to grapple a little bit more with. What does believing look like? What does living a faith look like? The authenticity of that. And what does it mean to have those deep, big questions? So I popped this in because actually we need to pause. I just wanted to pause a little bit and think, if you think, what's the most prominent image that you have of Jesus? I wonder what the most prominent image of Jesus is that the pupils would have in your local school. And I wonder where that image has come from. I'm going to show you very quickly just a few images as a way of introducing you to the way that schools are beginning to open up pupils' thinking. And I will absolutely whiz through these. Hopefully you've got in your mind now the most prominent image you've got of Jesus. Perhaps that was created during your RE lessons. So here we go. All images of Jesus. So I hope that brief things just opened up. Wow, how much conversation comes through that. And schools have really enjoyed the challenge of actually broadening their use of images of Christianity. I'm not going to take a long time to talk about this resource, Understanding Christianity. It is a very highly regarded resource. As you can see, it focuses very much on the big story of the Bible. It focuses on core concepts from creation to the kingdom of God. And it's a resource that a number of schools are actively using. It supports pupils and teachers with exploring theology, the beliefs of Christianity, which is one part of the RE curriculum. If it is a resource that you would like to know more about, please do be in contact, and I'm more than happy to have a further conversation. Just to flag up, church schools may well access this. It's available to all schools, and it also prides itself. It has everything within it that a teacher needs to know to support Christianity. But the point in 2016, when it landed as a resource to be encouraged and used, was it encouraged schools to look at text and impact and connections. And in 2016, to suddenly ask schools to really look at biblical text and unpick interpretations was an unfamiliar place to be. Church schools particularly are now very comfortable with that. And community schools are beginning to grasp this as well. That impact was that living tradition. What does it actually look like? And every unit within this resource would weave these elements together. And the idea of engaging with text, exploring the way that a religion responds to their texts, and then making connections is an approach that is used in a number of syllabuses. And also when we start looking at faith, religion beyond Christianity. You will also hear the terms balanced RE. What does balanced RE mean? Well, I've touched on it a little bit already. It is about that believing and thinking and living. Schools may call that theology, philosophy, and human social sciences. And schools are at a journey where they're beginning to unpick as to what does that look like? What does the journey of believing look like as we engage with, say, Islam as a religion? What do we need to know about their beliefs? What do we need to know about the questions of morality and ethics? And what do we need to know about the people who practice that religion? Huge questions, exciting times, resources are out there to support. And when it comes to Christianity, you are the people that can support that living. You are people who practice their beliefs. And that's one of the contributions that you can make to religious education in schools. So diocesan guidelines, as I've said, cover the number of syllabuses, but we are very encouraging and strong that pupils should have developed religious literacy. We also encourage that theological literacy, that pupils should have the opportunity to really examine and interrogate those ideas, the key ideas, and be able to have the skills to have conversations about those foundational beliefs. Because although the living practices may be very different, the foundational beliefs may be very core. As Helen already said, SciAMS touches on religious education, but it focuses on the curriculum. So what does that journey of pupils to hold an informed and balanced conversation about religions and worldviews look like? How does the curriculum designed? How are pupils able to make progress? And how does the school assess that progress? And that brings me to, that was a whistle-stop tour through RE, probably a really whistle-stop tour. I'll stop sharing and just open the floor for any questions, because I've said quite a lot there. So over to you. Any comments, questions? Are you aware of the syllabus? Oh, I've gone really dark. Hold on, I'll just put my light on. Oh no, that's worse. Is that worse? I don't know, that might be a bit better. I wonder if you're aware of what syllabus the schools that you support use. And I do know there's some people here who know that very, very well. And who know the resource Understanding Christianity probably better than I do. Good evening, Teresa. Any thoughts around religious education?
Hi, Ruth. It's Jeff again. I just wonder, is this, I'm a second year curate, and my incumbent has engaged me very much with the schools assembly at our local church school, and it has been a joy. It really has been a joy. But I just wanted a sort of practical question. If you want to, I'm not sure even my incumbent has had this, do you have to be invited in to come and into a religious education setting and teach, or not?
Yes. I mean, I think you could open the conversation in actually just asking them to tell me more about your religious education. Can I support Christianity at all? But I think it is a very, very fine line. And if you were in Essex, I'd probably be asking you I'd probably be asking you which church school, because I would then be able to say, yes, that would be one that you could have that conversation with quite easily, or one that actually there may be other ways of going in.
Okay.
And
I'm in Havering, so.
Okay.
It was just a practical question. I don't remember that David, my incumbent, has ever, in the time that he's been here, been in to do any kind of
schools. I think it is. Some schools have welcomed it. Some schools are very tentative over it, and sometimes it will depend on what the syllabus says.
Right.
Now, the Havering syllabus has very clear Christianity units within it, right. and the school may feel they don't need that to progress that any further.
Okay. Thank you.
Whereas, for example, if we went to Newham, I know full well that some of the Christianity around there is welcomed in schools and is used very actively within their RE curriculums.
Okay.
So I think that's probably it. But ask. Can you tell me about your Christianity teaching in RE? Just open that as a conversation, because you are a lived experience of practiced Christianity.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth, I wonder if it might just be helpful just to mention the inquiry-based learning to people, because that, for me, since the changes in 2016, that's been one of the strengths going forward. I think that's quite a useful element, really, from this entitlement.
Yeah, no, I can. You can talk about it if you would like. No. Right. So our RE is encouraged to be inquiry based, an inquiry process, and also we remind teachers that they don't have to be the font of all knowledge, because they are facilitators in RE. I'm not the font of all knowledge as the RE lead. I know a little bit, but I can signpost to others. So reminding teachers that they don't have to know it all to be good RE teachers, and they don't have to have a faith to deliver RE. Religious education is open to all. It's an exciting subject. It's an academic subject. It's there. So inquiry, we're encouraging schools, inquiry processes, which majority of syllabuses are based on, encourage pupils to, first of all, engage. So how are you going to excite them? How are you going to draw them into these big questions? Or how are you going to excite them about learning about the diversity of Hinduism? And then how are you going to plan an inquiry? So you might have a big question. What does it mean to be a Muslim in Britain today? Or why do Christians put a cross in the Easter garden? You may have a question that you want pupils to inquire. And then how are you going to explore that You might explore it through engaging with the text. You might explore it through creative activities. You might explore it through art, through music. How are you going to evaluate what they learn? So, and at the end of that, how are they going to express that knowledge? How are they going to show the knowledge and skills and the understanding that they've explored? For example, there's a school quite locally, a couple of years ago now, we're exploring their range of religions and worldviews. And at the end of year 6, decided to have a religion and belief museum. That was going to be their final part. And each year group had to decide what they were going to show in their showcase for that museum. And that was a really exciting way of actually knowing what they've got to find out, knowing they've got to present it in a way that others will find it engaging, rather than just recalling facts. Yes, we've had somebody in and they've said this, this, and this. Okay, well, you listen to that, but actually, if you present that, what's that going to look like? If I take you back to some of my images that I showed you of Jesus, one of the activities that I ask teachers and pupils sometimes to do is, if you see that image and you had to write a title for the art gallery, how would you entitle that picture? And we might all come up with different titles that would mean something. And then you say, well, tell me more, why? So that's just a small snippet, but that inquiry of engaging, inquiring, exploring, evaluating, and expressing. And I would invite all of you, if you want to know more about RE or the syllabuses, I am available. I am more than happy to have a chat about your area, your schools. I do also work with local authorities as well. So yeah, that's me, Andy.
That's you. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm stopping the recording.